Hey everyone, I'm Meghan Manfre and I lead both our security and our digital transformation domains here at Pluralsight. And I'm lucky to be joined in person with John Elliott, Peter Mosmans, two authors here at Pluralsight. But today we're going to talk about security skills, and specifically to start, we all know that we are facing a critical security workforce shortage. I think the most recent numbers I saw coming out of IRC Squared were upwards of 3 million security professionals we're going to be short over the next couple of years. I think we would all agree organizations can't hire this way out of the problem. Really, organizations need to build security expertise. And John, coming from the governance risk background, compliance function, Peter more from offensive security, I'm curious, what skill sets do you guys think leaders should be looking for to find successful individuals in these two different functions?
The really interesting thing is if you look at this skill shortage, it's a skill shortage not at the entry level. And so if I look at all the adverts, it's for people with 5 or 6 years experience. We're going to have to wait 5 or 6 years for that to happen. So people need to do something else and stop thinking that that's what we need to do. And stop thinking that we need to have people who've had security degrees or, you see things like, but security degrees have only been out a few years, and some of them aren't particularly good and they don't change very quickly. So what we need is transferable skills. What we need is to find people in our organizations who can move into security. And in GRC, actually it's pretty easy because you want people who you might, from an accounting background is a really good example, people who are with high attention to detail, and who have some interpersonal skills. We often saw in GRC, you're smiling at me now because you know where I'm going with this. But there was a time where GRC had you can't do that, no.
The people who say no.
The people who say no, the people who say no. And actually, we are the people who say yes, but how can we make that a skill for the organisation? But the transferable skills you need, you can find in accounting. I've taken people from accounting roles, even from marketing roles, because part of the time we need to communicate security to people. And so people who've had a marketing background or a social media background come in and they can do security literacy in the organisation. And from there they can often, because you can't do security literacy all your life. It gets a bit samey after a while.
Yeah.
And so you find they can then transition into being really good risk people. Because once you've done literacy, you can understand risk. Similarly, people who are already work in a risk or an internal audit environment can come in and learn cyber pretty quickly. There's some great content on Pluralsight you can do. Like if you're not great at computers to begin with, right? No one was born great at computers. Well, Peter might have been born great at computers, but no one's generally born great at this. We've learnt it. And so if you've got a fairly logical mind, let someone do the basic CompTIA course, the general IT course. And if they show an aptitude in that, then Security Plus. And often we've done some cool stuff in organizations where people have said, I'm really interested in what you do in your team. How do I get into it? It's like, well, keep on with your day job, right? Maybe become the security champion, because a lot of organizations have security champions, and a lot of organizations see that as the place where we can get people who will help talk about security in their department. But you should also look at those as they might be people who come and work in my team as well. So start as a security champion. Here, have a free Pluralsight subscription. Do your CompTIA. Did you enjoy that? Right. Do your Security Plus. Did you enjoy that? Great. Do you think you would like to work in this? So you have to go out and find people with the energy and aptitude who you think actually they could do this. Because to be honest, breaking into GRC is really great for learning security. Peter often says that we write nice, pretty documents, right? Which we do write documents, but it's brilliant because we get a very wide knowledge of the security domain. Rather than going really depth into offensive work or development security or infrastructure security, we get exposed very quickly to a wide range of security. If you work in compliance, you might start doing compliance assessments, and you might have to go do a compliance assessment of Active Directory security. So you learn a bit about Active Directory and you learn a bit about good practice in terms of least privilege. So you learn that little bit of IT and IT security, and then you learn a little bit more. You'd have to come in with it. And so that's why I think GRC is actually a really great way to bring people into the industry, especially if they don't come from originally technical backgrounds.
Yeah, so you mentioned Security Plus. Security Plus is interesting. it's almost a survey of all the different functions of security. You're exposed to a lot of different functions. One is offensive functions. So Peter, John's explained GRC and what he thinks would make for a skill set that makes someone adept at that. What about for any type of offensive roles, be it pen tester, red team operator? What would you say?
I'd say actually there's quite a bit of overlap with GRC as well. The first thing John mentioned was, for instance, interpersonal skills. And I think that is a very important skill to have, especially in offensive security. It's not the role of people in offensive security just to find holes, poke holes, but it's actually the role of translating that into what exactly is the risk for the company, what are the best mitigation strategies that a company should do. So there's a lot of interpersonal skills required, I'd say, which makes you the best fit for that specific role. Actually, I wanted to ask to John, what would you recommend for interpersonal skills when using the Pluralsight platform? Do you have any recommendations for that?
No. That's because I've not actually done any of the interpersonal skills stuff on the Pluralsight platform.
There is a host of different communications content on Pluralsight. We have content about how to communicate effectively, how to work well in meetings, how to work well virtually, specifically for communicating as a technologist and the different use cases and situations you might find yourself in. A wealth of content there. But Peter, what other skills would you say other than communication?
Actually, I agree with the things that John said with GRC. For instance, CISSP gives you a great broad wealth of knowledge about all different domains. And what you often see people moving into the more offensive security roles, at first they are trying to find out what exactly is it that ticks, what makes me drive or do the things that I do. And sometimes people say, hey, I want to go more towards reverse engineer, or I want to go more towards web penetration testing. So a nice healthy base like CISSP gives you that broad knowledge overview of what actually is possible, and then look what the next steps will be into your specific domain.
So between the two of you, where would you, contrasting skills, where would you say, are there any skill sets that don't apply across?
Yeah, people in GRC tend not to get very deep technical. We get very deep often in risk models and about understanding business risk and impact on the organization and probability or likelihood. So we spend a lot of time thinking about that and well, drawing pictures as well as writing documents about like risk models, for example. But we don't tend to program, for example. We don't tend to have that sort of programmer mindset or pen tester mindset of being, and I'm not saying anything here, Peter, but of being, what's the word I'm looking for? Like really determined to I'm not going to let driven. I'm not going to. I am curious. No, driven of. There's something there. I'm going to get to it. 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 And the best pen testers do that while also being really creative at thinking outside the box of how to do it. Right. Those are not actually skills that we need in GRC. We need creativity, of course, and we need openness about thinking about risk. And we need the communication skills, but we don't need that drive. No one's going to drive in a compliance assessment in the same way. Tenacity. That's the word I was looking for. Tenacity. Yeah. But that tenacity with that technical way of thinking of, I wonder if that would work. I wonder how. All right, I've spent 4 days now reverse engineering this binary. Right. I'm still not there, but I'm not giving up. Right. Because it's now almost a personal challenge. I really want to find out how this does this.
However, I'd also argue that in my experience, the best offensive security people also are very keenly aware of the scope and the surroundings, so that you don't lose yourself into that rabbit hole of actually trying to find a vulnerability while not doing a broad scope.
But from a risk perspective, I always think of the nation state actor, right, who will spend 5 or 6 days with that tenacity. And if I'm at that level with my threat actor that I'm concerned about being nation state, I actually want people with the same tenacity as the attacker will have, who will do that analysis, who will find that small little hole or thread and pull it and pull it and pull it until they get to the end. That's a really brilliant, vital thing that red teams and offensive testers have, to be able to not do this and go, oh yeah, it didn't pull, right? To go, no, I'm okay, come help me pull this, right? We don't have that in GRC, but that's what's brilliant skill and aptitude in offensive work, of pulling string.
I gotta say, sometimes when on a pen test or leading teams, when you see people working together,
Yeah.
I think it's beautiful,
Yeah,
the magic
totally.
of bouncing ideas off each other and then finding the indeed putting it all together in order to find that specific vulnerability.
So we've talked about the contrast between the two roles. Can someone transition between the two, or the two functions, I should say?
Absolutely is my first and final answer.
Okay. That was very short. I love it when people want to come from offensive into risk, because they have a much better the more knowledge you have makes your risk assessments much better. And so the more knowledge you have, if you pulled the string and seen how it works, people who come from that technical background into GRC teams do two great things. One is they educate the rest of the team, because someone will say, "Oh, there's not much risk. That's fine, isn't it?" And they'll go, "Oh no, have you thought about?" Because I've saw this before, and they educate the rest of the team, and it allows the team to go a little bit deeper, because sometimes you don't have the knowledge in the team to do that. Moving from GRC into offensive. I can see that they make really good offensive engagement managers, for example, of understanding what scoping is, of bringing the business risk conversation to the offensive thing. But have you ever seen people move from and I don't want to use, because a lot of people say, oh, GRC people are not technical, and I consider myself to be reasonably technical, right? But have you ever seen people move, they were really into development risk? And,
yes.
And then they look and they taught and they did stuff like they went to Pluralsight, and they had a Pluralsight so they could start learning development, because they wanted to have better conversations with the development team about development security. And then it's like, actually, I could just do this instead. Look what those developers or those offensive people get paid. I want to go and do that.
I'd say then a complementary skill, so to speak, what I think makes it easier to transition from the people who write really useful and good documents and draw diagrams of moving towards offensive security is also more development, actually. So get a better understanding of how to automate processes,
right.
How to make it easier. Because I'd say that we pen testers or offensive security, we're actually lazy in a good sense, that we try to automate as much as possible and then enjoy as much as time in order to find that specific vulnerability. But you want to make sure that all the things that are easily automated away, that you do those first.
Yeah.
So get a better understanding of development and frameworks, etc., what you're trying actually to break.
I might say efficient.
Efficient, thank you. That was the word I was looking for. Yeah.
So kind of to wrap up, I know you too well. I love listening to the conversations. You come from two very different perspectives, and it always brings out really interesting ideas and thoughts. What piece of advice would you give to someone who's working with someone in a different function, GRC to offensive security? What's your one piece of advice in working well with one another?
Cooperation, trying to understand each other's viewpoint, see where the people from the GRC, what their point of view is, trying to see for the GRC people to see what their point of view is, and then actually seeing that there's no us versus them, but it's actually we're all trying to do it together. So better understanding, that would be my...
Yeah, I would say two things working with GRC teams. One is, in fact, working with the whole business. One is, don't be proud of, be satisfied with breaking something, but don't make people feel bad. Don't ever make somebody feel bad, because after an offensive security exercise, the internal teams have got to make that person feel good again and do security well. So by saying, it's the us and them, don't do the us and them. And secondly, an awareness of risk. Not every vulnerability, even if the CVSS is 10, right? Or maybe 8.
And what is CVS, which version, and which temporal score.
And which temporal score and which environmental score, right? Just don't always assume that because you found a vulnerability, it actually is as serious as you think it is. And I see that a lot from maybe inexperienced assessors.
Understanding risk. So understanding risk. That the role from offensive security people in general, they only say something about operational or technical risk, and there's much more to risk than just that.
Absolutely. I mean, I once got a red team exercise, and the person who ran the red team exercise was one of the best security professionals I've ever seen, because they had worked out that the success to a red team exercise was how much the blue team learned from it. right? Not how much GRC learned from it, not about the root cause, but how it improved the blue team. And they'd obviously done it so many times, and they'd worked out that there is no us and them. In fact, it was, oh wow, you did really well. You probably could have seen that. What tool do you have for doing that? Show me how you use that tool. Okay, you do that attack again. Now let's watch that tool. And it became a learning session. Mm-hmm. It was effectively purple teaming.
Cooperation.
Right, but it was absolute cooperation between the two. And the blue team at the end were like, wow, that was the best week we've ever had. And I've seen it go the other way, where the blue team at the end of the week didn't want to come to work the next week. Right.
They feel ashamed, as if somebody was pointing fingers as opposed
right.
to,
And the more that offensive security can do that is awesome.
There's something really powerful in coming together for a common goal.
Totally.
Everyone uniting for that one goal and seeing their piece in it.
Yeah.
Well, I thank you for such a lively conversation. It's always great to see you two in person, and thank you for everything you've shared.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.